Well, it's left over from a long time before that, I think. I mean, the issues of peace and justice have existed as long as there's been a written history of humankind. Uh, but it's a simple phrase, I think, that connotes certain kind of ideas to people. Whether they view them positively or not, I can't say. I would like to think they would. Almost everybody says they're for peace. Is that Eleanor Roosevelt had it right. She said, if I remember correctly, that it's not enough to be for peace. You must work for it, and you must work for it on a daily basis. So I think she had the right idea.
You know, what's made you kind of the way you are? Was it coming of age in the '60s? Was it, you know, what's made you the way you are?
How I got to this point in my life, epiphany or revolutionary thing that changed me. It was a very slow process. I would say that it started in the 1950s with around the time of the McCarthy period. I remember that when I got out of service, I was in for a couple of years as an invited guest, that I hoped to get a job in something related to the work I'd been doing before I went into service, which was advertising, or while I was in service, while I was at the Psychological Warfare Center, to get a job connected in some fashion in Europe, because I wanted very much to be able to go to Europe and spend some time there. And in visiting various American agencies in Europe, like the USIA libraries that were planted all over the world and still are, I learned very quickly how those agencies were being stripped of people because their budgets were being cut and books were being taken off the shelf that had any kind of a real human factor in them. I'm talking about the works of Mark Twain and Jack London and others, and it gave me a sense of something not being quite right with the political culture in the United States at that time. So I kept my eyes open, and I can't say I devoted any great amount of energy to pursuing those kinds of matters, except to try to learn a little bit more about what was happening. And I ended up working as a radio reporter in Europe for about a year, but not with the Radio Free Europe, for instance, or the U.S. Information Agency. It was with the Dutch government. So those were the early seeds. And then a number of years later, having returned to the States and been in the advertising business, I left the business, this time not at the invitation of Uncle Sam, but to pursue a dream, and that was a personal odyssey of taking a trip around the world, which I did. And I spent a lot of that time in third world countries, and it opened my eyes to a lot of things that, frankly, I had not given a great deal of thought to.
Specifically, what types of things did it open your eyes up to?
Well, I saw how much of the world was living hand to mouth in circumstances that we as Americans would often be appalled at, I imagine. And let me go back even one step further. I think even long before the McCarthy period came the end of the Second World War. I was just a bit too young to be called into service then, which is why I put in my service during the Korean period. But I was one who grew up in a very tight-knit Jewish community in Detroit, and following the end of the war, not so much during the war, except that we were very much aware of refugees coming in. My family brought in one. But we learned about the death camps, and that hit very hard. And as a community, we said then, as we say now, never again. And my view of that, particularly as I matured, was that meant not only for us Jews, but for any people who are being attacked because of who they are. And I've held that very close in my heart, I think, and I believe that that indeed is the real underpinning of why I do much of what I do.
You know, and just to clarify that, what is it that you do exactly? You know, as far
Yeah,
as
sure. No, I understand. Well, my closest affiliations have for many years now been with the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights. I've been on their board of directors for the last 20 plus years, and this year I'm the co-chair. I've been the vice president of the Cranbrook Peace Foundation for over a decade. And both of those groups are concerned with the kinds of issues that we have been talking about. Peace in the world, but not just peace, because peace without justice is really no peace at all. So it must be accompanied by a just system which gives one a society that has equitable values and treats people up and down the ladder with a certain amount of fairness, because lacking that you may indeed find peace. I mean, you have had situations in dictatorships where there certainly has been peace because the people couldn't speak out. And that's no peace at all. At least that's not peace in my view.
So, what do you and Tom Gumbleton share then? It sounds like there's things that you have a lot in common.
Well, I can hardly put myself in his league. Nonetheless, our lives have brought us together on a number of occasions, both in the Metro Detroit area around a great variety of activities. And beyond that, we, or I at least, have been privileged to travel with him and others to various parts on the globe where there was conflict and a lack of peace and certainly a lack of justice. Such places as Iraq twice before the war started, although he himself has been back since and was there any number of times before I first got there. We have gone to Colombia together and to Haiti. But I can hardly compare myself with him, except we both have clearly a conviction that we must do something to change many things that we see in front of our eyes.
And if you can work Tom's name into it, you know, because they won't hear my questions, and without so much narration.
I understand. I should have kept it.
So how did you specifically meet Tom Gumbleton? What brought you guys together? Was there a specific moment?
Well, I knew who he was long before he knew who I was. Tom Gumbleton was out there doing things, well, I don't know when that all started in his life, but I do recall hearing Tom Gumbleton give a talk. I believe it was at the old U of D Mercy campus on Outer Drive during the Vietnam period, probably in 1968, thereabouts. He drew a large crowd and gave a very strong talk on the injustices that he saw in connection with the Vietnam War. And at that time, it was relatively early on, and Bishop Gumbleton was being attacked by some who did not like what he was saying and tried to disrupt the talk. And I heard him, as I say, for the first time under those circumstances, admired both his personal courage and what he had to say. And so from that point on, I was looking forward to the day when I might meet him and when our paths might cross. And indeed, they soon did and have many times since.
What was the first thing you guys did together, or did you collaborate on something together? Was it a trip, or?
I can't really recall what that would be.
You know, so I take it religion really doesn't have a lot to do with what you both do. For Bishop Gumbleton, I think his faith certainly imbues everything that I see him doing. From the moment he gets up in the morning, having traveled with him and being his roommate on a number of occasions, seeing him sitting down in a corner quietly concentrating and reading from scriptures
It's a moment and time in his life, I presume every morning, although I can't say, that he takes aside to think about why he is there and what he's going to be doing. As far as I'm concerned, I am a member of a temple here. It's a secular temple, Jewish temple in the Detroit area, Birmingham Temple, and being Jewish is a very important part of what I am and how I see the world. But I don't know that that plays any part in our relationship. Although I have attended a few masses that Bishop Gumbleton has celebrated, both in the open air in the jungle in Colombia and from a very large church in Baghdad. He is a world figure. There's no question about it. He is widely known, at least in the places where I have been with him away from our own shores. He is beloved. He's called upon for his wisdom, and he handles it all with a really a very quiet modesty at all times. He's a quiet man, and I think that is at least in part one thing that attracts people to him. Also, it's not that he doesn't speak his mind and speak it in a very determined fashion, but his own style is one of being quiet and reserved and with a very good sense of humor. So those are some of the personal qualities that I see in him.
It's low. It's, yeah.
I'm giving you some long-winded answers. I should.
Well, you know, succinct helps, but these are good because you're bringing up things. You're leading right into things. You know that, you know, Tom is modest, and it's funny how he's really not recognized here locally, and he's not even. It's sort of not. It's not even the lack of recognition. It's almost not the derision. It's just people just don't seem to have respect for him here that he commands over there. Not that he looks for the respect.
The people who know him do.
Oh, yeah, he does,
Right.
yeah, exactly. But
Sure.
it seems in the general sense, especially, you know, you don't have to be a Catholic or an expert to see that Tom is kind of out of step with the
Yeah.
Catholic Church.
Yeah.
But my
Right.
question to you is it Tom or is it the Catholic Church that's out of step? Really?
I would not be the one to ask. I have my own views on it.
Well, yeah, and, you know, and Tom wouldn't even answer that question either
No.
probably if I asked him like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe give me a general sense, you know, maybe phrase it more as how Tom's views are a little bit out of step with the churches, you know, if you feel comfortable. If not, we can walk away.
No, I can talk a little bit about that.
You know, how do you see Tom, you know, Tom's faith as being different from what the rest of it?
Right. I think Bishop Gumbleton has a very special quality which allows him to act and speak and write about those issues which he sees most affecting the local community and the world today with a foundation in what he learned as a child. And I think that's characteristic of most of the people who are in the so-called peace and justice community. I think they and we were so foolish that we believed the tenets that came to us through our parents and others as children. I mean, that you shouldn't lie, and you shouldn't steal, and somebody needs bread, you feed them. If somebody needs clothing, you see that they're clothed. And in general, because the world is as it is, I think that when you grow up, you have other concerns, which is very understandable, and many look back on those days as part of the fairy tale period of their life, where when you get out in the real world, you practice realpolitik, and those other things are nice to teach the children that are coming along behind you. But if you really believe those things, being very foolish, then you perhaps continue to act on it when you're no longer a child. And I see that in so many people who are doing the same kind of work, who are unsung, but they're out there, and I could mention a lot of them. I won't do that now, of course. But there are a lot of people who don't get the credit for what they're doing, but they're out there because they made that their life. And these are the heroes to me that I see, and I feel very privileged to have a chance to work with many of them.
Yeah, and I guess I don't look at it as being just a, obviously a Catholic thing for Tom. I'm sure there's rabbis who are the same way as Tom.
There are.
Can you, one of the people I'm going to talk to is Rabbi Conrad.
Yes.
And I guess, can you give me a sense of how similar Rabbi Conrad and Tom Gumbleton are? So I'm not having met Conrad.
Sure. Well, Rabbi Ernst Conrad is one of my heroes. He's now retired. He's emeritus rabbi at Temple Kol Ami in West Bloomfield, I think. And he has personal experiences which not many people I know share. He was raised in Germany, and as a young man, as a late teenager, I think, he had charge of a group of youngsters who were in his care for that evening for whatever reason in some kind of a public building, a school or something. And that was on Kristallnacht, the night of the broken glass. And he had the responsibility for hiding and protecting those children during that. So he comes from a background which others came from as well, but not many people that I know, and not many people, I suspect, moving in our society here today. And he brought those kinds of understandings and commitment to stop that sort of thing to him when he came to the United States, and he's practiced it, as far as I know, all his life, but I've only known him for 25 years or so, and his life extends well before that, you know.
And are there similarities between him and Gumbleton in the way they approach life or they approach issues?
I don't think I'm qualified to say, but I've seen enough of Rabbi Conrad to know that he too has the courage of his convictions and will step out in front and say, this is what I believe, in a way that not all rabbis or all priests or all pastors will do. And I give him a great deal of credit for that.
And that's an interesting thing for me too, that being Catholic, seeing the priests, the relatively few priests that are coming out nowadays, and I imagine it's the same all over, having done work with some Jewish groups as well. It seems like the priests and rabbis out today don't have this commitment to peace and justice so much as it's more, they're more bureaucrats or something. I don't know the exact term, but they don't have this.
I hear you.
Is it a generational thing? Is it something?
I'm not so sure that it hasn't always been that way. I don't know. We remember those who were heroic and spoke their minds at a time when it needed to be done. But we don't remember those that didn't. And I have no way of knowing whether there's more or less of that now, but my hunch is that it has always been only a few who were courageous and spoke their mind in a time that they were needed, those words were needed. I don't know that it's any different than it was before.
And you're kind of couching some of these answers. I think you're trying to be a little bit politically correct, so I want you to,
No, I'm
okay.
telling you what I think.
All right, good. Going on with that, it's, I don't see the commitment in a lot of ways, and maybe it has been. There's been a radical few, but it almost seems like there's more of this, let's look at the demographics versus, let's help the poor or something. And I guess, I'm just not sure if it's, I guess I'm looking at it as a generational thing. Do the people nowadays, because we have so much, we take things for granted, and maybe your generation or Tom's, is it a generational thing? Your age group saw the horrors of war, saw, and it's not, but saw, had a different perspective than we do today?
I'm not sure that I know the answer to that, but I can, as we speak, I think also of men like Father John Nolan and Father Norman Thomas, and Reverend Ed Rowe, and the Reverend Harry Cook, and others who are all courageous people and committed to what they see as following the dictates that they have and the principles that they got at their parents' knees. And I'm sure there's a lot more that I don't know. So I really can't speak in those general terms, but I have really had my own life enriched by the kind of people we're talking about, and to walk with them and work with them on a fairly regular basis has been a wonderful thing in my life.
Who's going to take their place? I mean, this generation is, you know, I don't want to say Twilight type thing, but you know, who's moving in to take a place of Tom Gumbleton or?
I see some young people coming along. If we're talking about names, I see Jeff Nelson out at the Methodist Church in Birmingham. I see young rabbis, Adam Shalom and Tamara Colton. They're out there. They're out there. I just don't spend a lot of time in churches or temples or mosques, though I probably spend more time than I would have imagined some years ago. But I don't know the whole spectrum there. But there are some wonderful young people coming along, just a handful that I do know.
Got the cat in the background?
Yeah.
Keep on stay for a second.
Something happening beside? You know, we were speaking about who's going to take the place.
Right,
But just in the Michigan Coalition for Human Rights Board, we've got 3 or 4 young people who are under 30, and those are the ones that are going to be there. I think that just observing them, I think they're going to be lifelong workers for peace and for justice, and many more that I don't know. The Cranbrook Peace Foundation has a youth leadership project where we take high school juniors from Detroit and from the suburbs, mix them together in a blend, and give them a year's worth of training and experiences where they learn about the issues that are in front of all of us. I mean, whether they're labor or food, homeless people, union work, all kinds of things. And then they go back for a last year in high school and they write and they talk about it, and I just feel absolutely certain that a significant percentage of these young people are going to be working that way throughout their life.
yeah. See him reflected in that picture. I don't know if having that third picture you see.
Oh, yeah. Or just the top, just,
Could you come bring the cat over here maybe and sit here? We're seeing you reflected in the picture here. Oh, the cat's just she's gonna hurt herself. The cat's gonna let you know you're in trouble here. Okay. That's right. You know, and I asked Jack Lessenberry this as well. You know, the U.S., you know, we just don't seem to learn our lesson. You know, with Haiti and El Salvador and Iraq, you know, what's the lesson we're not learning? What's the lesson that the U.S. just isn't learning? You know, in New Orleans.
Yeah, sure. That's a very big question. And I think at the root of much of it is the fact that it is money that is controlling our political system and developing a political culture which, in my view, is unworthy of the American people. And I think that can change. It's not a question of political party, because both major parties feed at the trough. And I think that our elections are not as honest as they should be. And I think certain groups in the country, commonly called right-wing Christian groups, but certainly not exclusively that, have an undue influence, and I think we have to take back our country. And I hope I'm around long enough to see that process get underway. It's not because they wear a certain label. It's because of the principles or lack of principles that they're bringing to the control of the country. And I think now that it's finally reaching some sort of a critical mass where people are beginning to understand that, and I remain cautiously optimistic that they will act on it the next time they have an opportunity. We'll see.
You know, that kind of brings to a point here, you said that critical mass, and I'm torn between two things. That's a long question, and I hope it makes sense. You know, the U.S. has had so much for so long. I mean, you know, and as people have said, you know, we have 1/3 of the world's population, yet we consume 2/3 of the world's
Yeah,
population.
we're about 6% of the world population, probably closer to 5.
And I guess in my mind, I'm conflicted because, you know, obviously, for my kids, I want what's best for them. I want them to have a better life. And,
Of course.
But, you know, there's so much waste. We waste so much. You know, is what's happening now where we're shipping all these well-paying jobs overseas, and it almost seems like, you know, to keep things in balance, you know, the rest of the world's going to come up and we're going to have to come down. Unfortunately, nobody wants to be on part of that going down part.
That's right.
You know, so is it a good or bad thing, globalization, or I guess?
Well, I think in the short run, it will maintain a certain kind of hegemony for
Let's make it a complete
us.
thought, because you're starting in the middle, and
Yeah,
I guess
I-
they're not
yes.
hearing my question. So maybe
Right.
globalization, or whatever you want to
Right,
say.
right. I forget that. I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yes. In talking about what has happened to our own society, I think you have to go back to include at least a paper written by a widely admired American diplomat named George Kennan in the late 1940s, after the end of World War II, in which he proposed, and it's in print, I mean, one can find it easily enough in a number of reference books, in which he proposed as a underlying thesis for American foreign policy in the future that we acknowledge to ourselves that we have then only 5 or 6% of the world's population, but we enjoy the majority of its resources, consume them, and that there will be, in the years to come, he predicted, and properly so, a rising up of the rest of the world to say, how is it that you can have all that and we can't? And there will be bleeding hearts in the United States who say we ought to share some of this with the rest of the world, and we must not let that happen. We must take as our principle that we have to hold on to the share of the world that we have and not let people talk us out of it. And I dare say, from my looking back on the years that I've been around, that policy is exactly the one that has been adopted by the United States in its foreign policy relationships. And I think we're seeing the damage that has caused for not only the United States, but for the world in general. I mean, it is an underlying basic principle, in my view, of United States foreign policy for the last 55, 60 years. And you can get to a point, it seems to me, where you have made such an effort to see that you continue to control the vast resources of the world that you cause an uprising in the rest of the world which says we're not going to stand for that for them. And I hope wiser heads prevail and dump that idea and not give everything away. I'm not saying that that's what we have to do, but to perceive that it's in our own best interest to share so that we too can survive and enjoy this wonderful life that we have in the United States, or most people, or many people have. I mean, we know plenty who don't have it, but as a whole, the United States has far more than its share, as we all know, and how long can that be maintained? I think not too much longer.
Yeah, there's a little bit of noise.
It's done.
You doing any more today? This is the
No,
last.
this is it, yeah. My wife's company party, or Christmas party or holiday party is at the DIA tonight. She's like, if we miss that.
Ah, that's nice. Who does she work for?
It's an engineering company in Rochester Hills. It's called Giffords Webster Engineering.
Got her
Party.
up to dinner here. It's Saturday for you.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, at the Peace and Justice Awards that we saw, it wasn't just Catholics there. It wasn't just Jewish. There was imams.
No, it was a good
It was a
mixture.
good mix. Can you talk about how multiple faiths are working towards the same thing? Because I think a lot of people think it's only the Catholics doing good. They only, I'm sure the Jewish think it's only. Can you just talk about how it's, you know, everybody really has a sense that this is a kind of.
I can talk about that a little bit, I suppose. One of the good things about being involved in this special world of people who are interested in peace and justice and human rights is the fact that you encounter and work with people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds, different nationalities, certainly different religions, certain racial differences. And while we are, because it's human nature, conscious that this one over here is a Catholic, this one is a Jew, this one is a Muslim, or that one is black and this one is Asian, you know that, but it not only doesn't change what it is that you're doing, but it opens up an individual's eyes to the fact that what you share in your head and your heart overrides all these other things, and sets, if you will, a model for how people can work together everywhere. I had not all that much contact, very little contact, as a young person with any Catholic clergy, or nuns, or reverends, or certainly not imams. But my life has been so enriched by seeing the people that are out there doing the kind of things they're doing, and whose view of the world and what it needs is one I can share with them. That I hope for the world that it could happen on a grand scale. Maybe it will someday. Maybe it will. Bridges have to be built. I mean, we got bombs to knock down bridges, but we'd darn well better build some bridges so that people can talk to each other and understand each other. And I don't say we should all end up being one color right in the middle and taking a piece of this religion and a piece of that religion. That doesn't have to happen. But people can work together. And the stories come out all the time. You hear about the Israeli and the Palestinian who somehow got together and love each other. And you hear it about maybe in India and Pakistan. The possibilities for that are great, and the instances of it are numerous and appear from time to time in the press. So we know it can be done.
You've been to Haiti and Iraq and also, and you know, I'm embarrassed to say I know really nothing. You know, because the news media here just doesn't cover it here. You know, they really don't emphasize or really make people aware what's happening here.
Absolutely true.
You know, what, you know, first of all, you know, describe like a Haiti or something for me, what you've seen there. And then tell me, you know, well, let's do that. Let's just do it. Describe Haiti for me.
If I were to talk about Haiti, and I would base it on 4 trips that I have made there, 3 because I was concerned about what was happening in Haiti, and the 4th one over 50 years ago when I went as a tourist. So that's, you know, that's quite a different thing. As a very young man, I was in Haiti for a week of vacation, staying in a small but very nice little hotel way up the hill in Pétionville, which is where all the Haitian wealth is assembled, or virtually all of it, and thought how quaint and charming it was to see these women walking up that same hill. I came up in a taxi cab with big burdens on their heads. But the last 3 trips, I have been there once during the first coup, which followed the ouster of President Aristide, and then
back as an official observer of the elections that took place in the summer of 1995, and again about a year ago to see the complete destruction of whatever society was there. It is hell on earth for most of the people who live in that poor country, and I use that word poor both literally and figuratively. It is being ruled by a gang of people who were brought in, basically, it shames me to say it, but by the United States. Their leader, in quotes, is a man named Gerard Latortue, who was a wealthy man living outside of Haiti for many years, I think in Florida, and was picked by our government to go back and be the nominal leader. The National Police Force is a group of thugs who go out and kill people on a regular basis, and we saw them out there, many of them in black masks so they couldn't be recognized, with weapons at the ready, and the daily reports coming from people who are courageous enough to go into the poor neighborhoods and work at great risk to try to get them some food. I mean, they're literally starving, and the word is that about 30 are being killed a day. I mean, they're not all by the national police. The UN has got a bloody hand in there. I've been a big backer all my life, well, since 1945 of the UN. I'm an ardent supporter of the idea of that kind of an organization, but their track record is not good in Haiti, I can tell you that, where their cars that we saw and their vehicles were sitting up in the wealthy areas, by and large protecting the people, and who have been reported by very reliable sources to be participants in this attack on the poor people who live in these just unbelievably poor areas, neighborhoods in Port-au-Prince. They've got 700 or 800 members of the La Balasse party, which was the party of the ousted President Aristide. I still do not buy the idea that he left on his own. They are sitting in prison without charges. The Constitution of Haiti says they must be brought before a judge in 48 hours. It does not happen. I had a chance to meet and spend a good bit of time with, and I like to think befriend, Father Gerard Jean Juste, who's sitting in prison. I mean, this thing they concocted against him is so outrageous that nobody in the world believes it, but it's enough for them to keep him in jail so that he couldn't run if he wished to, and that's not certain. He couldn't run to be possibly president of Haiti. And there's a lot of opinion which thinks he would be. Former Premier Yvonne Neptune has been in prison for a couple of years now, and hundreds of others, hundreds, no charges, nothing. It is simply a matter of, with U.S. support, no question about it, attempting to keep the Haitian people from having the democracy they want, coming from an administration that says we are taking democracy to this poor benighted country called Iraq so that they can experience the joy that we have of that kind of a life, and who have done everything possible to destroy any possibility of it in Haiti. Other than that, I have no opinions about it.
Yeah, I learned more in the couple minutes you talk about it than I've known in my whole life. So, well, and then going to the point of when Tom goes there, as one man, what can Tom Gumbleton accomplish by going to Haiti? I mean,
Tom Gumbleton has been in Haiti many times. He had some sort of a friendship, and still does, I presume, with Aristide, and was responsible in a way because of his personal invitation to Jean-Bernard Aristide to come into Detroit to give a talk here some years back while he was still in exile and based in Washington. And he's a very close friend and fellow practitioner of Father Jean Juste, whom I mentioned earlier. He's conducted masses in Father Jean Juste's St. Clair Parish, and has been part of the international force, a really significant figure in the international forces that have come together to try to get this man to be freed. And the last time I was there, though not his last time, was the very day and almost the very hour that we arrived in the capital that Father Jean Just was released the first time. The first time. Now he has been given a hard time and taken back to prison where he's been for the last 5 months or so. At this point, his health is very poor, but Bishop Gumbleton has had an opportunity to visit him a couple of times down there and to use his voice to speak out against the things that he sees happening in Haiti. So it's not just that he goes in and he says hello to a few people. I mean, his voice gets heard.
So just to kind of condense that, can like a Tom Gumbleton make a difference, by doing these things? You think one man, what's he going to change?
Tom Gumbleton can make a difference, I think. I mean, he's not going to change everything that's happening there, but he is widely enough recognized and admired that when he speaks on that subject, when he comes back to the United States, people listen and the word spreads and people begin to understand. While he's actually there, he can bring messages of good cheer to people like Father Jean Just and call for some medical assistance by putting pressure on the U.S. Embassy, along with others that travel with him when he goes, usually in a small group. To say that he's been successful and that Father Jean Just is now out is a different matter. That hasn't happened. But I think that they understand in Haiti that people are watching, and people like Bishop Gumbleton are getting the word out, and they better watch where they go. Now, they've operated with a fairly free hand, but I think that they are cautious enough not to do some things because of people like Bishop Gumbleton.
Gumbleton went to Iran for the hostages to see them, and he was almost not ridiculed or criticized.
Sure.
Can you just kind of refresh your memory of
Sure.
How that whole mission was perceived?
Well, I think the first time he went as a guest of the Ford Motor Company to work at their request to get some people that were endangered that worked for the Ford Motor Company in Iraq, and he was successful. But in his visits following that, he worked strenuously to make the American people aware of the price that was being paid for the UN, US, UK sanctions on Iraq and the devastation that was causing. And if I can use numbers for a moment, and I do not in any sense wish to diminish the great tragedy of 9/11. I mean, horrors. 3,000 people. But the UN's own figures showed that about 5,000 young children under the age of 5 were dying every single month in Iraq as a direct result of the sanctions that were keeping out the things that they needed. Our country said, our politicians said time and time again, endlessly, that this was all the fault of Saddam Hussein. Bad man, of course, horrible man. We've got a few others around the world as well. And he was not working for his people either, quite the contrary. But that did not, in my view, and the view of many others who had a chance to experience firsthand, did not mitigate the responsibility of the United States for what it did in keeping those sanctions on and causing the death of these children that didn't even speak about the adults. It was horrible. And Tom Gumbleton had the courage to go there and to see and to connect with the people that he did in the church circles and others, and to come back and report on it and to return again. And I think he's made 7 or 8 trips there, including a trip that he made following the first months of the war, this most recent war. It's hard to keep track of American wars, But he has been very forthright, very committed, well known in many people in Iraq, and blessed, I may say, by them for doing what he has been doing. It's for the people. It wasn't for the government of Saddam Hussein.
On the part of just the peace movement in Detroit, my question would be to Rudy. Rudy, I see you at so many different things in the last 15 years that I've been involved. I see you at the great, the $1,000 dinner, plate dinners, but you're also at.
I've never been at $1,000 plate.
Well, not $1,000. I'm sorry, $100. But you're also you're when 2,000 soldiers had U.S. soldiers has died. You were there with about a dozen people, on a very cold day. You show up at the small. You're very consistent. You're at Woodward 9 Mile a lot. Every Monday. What makes people like you and Tom Gumbleton? You guys do the big stuff and you guys do the little stuff. What keeps you consistent? And steadfast.
And talk towards me. So
Yes. Well, I think the older I get, the more I have come to understand that if you're going to do this, you do it on a regular basis. And the more I see the example of other people, and I'm not just talking about Bishop Gumbleton, I'm talking about many other people, Bishop Coleman, McGee, and I don't want to start naming names because there are so many of them. But you see how that plays out in other lives. And I figured out some time ago that the only thing I couldn't do was nothing. And once you start the ball rolling, your vision hopefully is widened, and you see how what got you started in the first place plays out in a number of other arenas. So you keep on going. And I've been fortunate in that having worked all of my life, I've come to a position where I can, if I wish to, as my own boss, take time off on a Monday afternoon at 4:30 and go stand on the corner of Woodward and 9 Mile Road. And so it's the little things as much as the big things. I mean, it's nice to be up there standing in front of people and talking, but it's the little things that add up and build some consistency, and I see it from so many people who are likewise involved.
Tom Gumbleton is humble as yourself and stuff. How do you think he would like to be remembered, or you would like to be remembered, or as accomplishing something? How do you think people?
I can't speak for Bishop Gumbleton, though there's no question in my mind he will be well remembered and spoken of and quoted for many years to come from the people that he's touched in his life. For myself, I hope to leave proud memories of some kind for my sons, and if some people remember, that will be nice, and if others step in and do the same thing, that's even more important,
Having a 9-year-old son, what do you feel like some of the work you're doing is for him, or do you?
Oh, you bet. Absolutely. With a 9-year-old son, which is a gift of my later life, I look at that boy and I say to myself, I'm going to do what I can do to see that he's not part of any marching armies when he's a young man some years, not too many years from now. And I want, working with others, to try to leave him a world that's somehow better than it was, before the years earlier. So, yeah, of course, I look at the world as I think it might be when he grows up, and I hope he has good values, and I hope that he stands for some of the same things I do. I suppose every father wants that. How it will be, I don't know, but we shall see.
Yeah, how do you make that happen? How do I make my kids, the responsible type of people that, have concern for others, and have those values for other people? I mean,
I suppose to some extent we all think as parents that we have this set of values which are the right sets of values, and that kid had better have those values. And I think that's as true with anybody who would disagree with what I think as it is with those who would agree. So you try to pass on what you think is important, and you hope that what you think is important is worthwhile, and then the chips fall where they will.
Is there something that you want to say that I haven't asked you? We're going to wrap it up now.
I understand.
Did you? Is there something that you feel like?
No, I just have a feeling I talk too much
No,
already.
well, how about somebody then? Just just a final thought on Tom Gumbleton, your friendship. I mean, why do you value your friendship with Tom?
I see Tom Gumbleton as a model for having the kind of courage that it takes to accomplish something these days in the whole field that we're talking about. I see others as well, and it just so happens that I've been able to travel to various places with him in a way that I haven't with some of the others. He's an exceptional man. There are a number of exceptional men and women out there. To me, as a growing boy in a Jewish neighborhood, a nun was someone who taught school and was hard on the kids and perhaps was a follower of Charles Coughlin. But as I have grown older and worked with people like Sister Rita Mary and I would name a whole bunch of others, I've seen the other side of that whole picture, and it has been just a great reward for me. One of the things about doing this kind of thing is even if you never affect a single policy the way you would like to, is the fact that you get to spend so much of your life with other people that you admire and love. And just those kinds of associations make it worthwhile. I mean, I hope that there's more than that too, but you never know. But the payoff is there every day, just in those kinds of associations.